welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you with us for this Bird-Friendly Communities Lunch and Learn for the month of March. Today's presentation is a part of a series of Lunch and Learns that all pertain to Michigan Bird-Friendly Communities program within the state of Michigan. And today we're going to cover how to be a good Purple Martin landlord. But before we get started, I'd like to review just a few logistics for everyone. There's two ways you could be joining us today, either through Zoom or through Facebook. We'll happily take any questions throughout the entire presentation, but we will be answering them at the end. So if you're using Zoom, you can share your questions with us in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. But if you're joining us via Facebook, you can add your questions right to the comment section. And I'll be monitoring those throughout the entire presentation, and we'll work as hard as we can to answer as many of those questions as possible at the end. We are recording this presentation, and it will be available for future viewing, both through Facebook, through our Facebook page, and that will be available immediately after this presentation, but also through our website and or our YouTube channel at a later date. So if you're watching a recording of this presentation, or if you have questions at a later time, you can reach out to us with those questions through our Michigan Audubon general email address, which is birds@michiganaudubon.org. So thank you again for joining us today. We're really excited to have you with us. And with that, I will turn things over to our Conservation Science Coordinator, Linnea Rowse.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you, Lindsay, for the introduction. As she said, my name is Linnea Rowse, and I'm going to be talking about purple martins today. And I'll start out here with just the title of our program, Michigan Purple Martin Friends. We intentionally chose this name originally because instead of saying Michigan Purple Martin Initiative or Association or even a program, because we really wanted the name to reflect the importance of people and community in the conservation of purple martins. So today I'll just introduce you to purple martins, to a little bit about their biology, about their conservation and the population trends and why we care, as well as great tips to be a good landlord to those purple martins. So let's get started. So this is kind of a common story. When we talk to people about purple martins, we hear my grandparents, my parents, my neighbor, my aunt and uncle, my friends, etc. had a purple martin house. This is the purple martin story in Michigan. Unfortunately, for the purple martin, being a landlord is no longer in fashion anymore. This is an issue that we all grapple with. How do we get more people, both young and old, engaged in conservation and just engaged in the outdoors? And a lot of our conservation work with Michigan Audubon and other organizations depends on your engagement. So let's just start with the basics. Let's meet the purple martin. This photo is of an ASY, which means after second year adult male purple martin. So I distinguish this after second year because they look a little bit different after their second molt, after their second winter of life. The adult males are a deep purple with black wings. At a distance, they might look kind of just all dark or black, but they're just a very beautiful bird, especially when the sunlight hits them. The ASY, or adult after second year female, looks pretty similar, but she has a lot more speckling and brown on her undersides and throat. And the subadult male, or a male who is in his first year of life, looks a lot more like a female. Lots more speckling in the throat, though there are usually some of those bluish purple feathers in that throat area. So they can be pretty easily confused with an adult female if you have a lot of birds swooping in and out of a colony. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of them all. I don't have a photo there of a sub-adult female, but they look very light tan and brown, kind of all overall. Let's talk about their biology. So adult martins weigh almost 2 ounces on average. To give you a comparison, 1 ounce is about the weight of a slice of whole wheat bread. So they're very lightweight, as most songbirds are. Their length of their body from tip to tail is 7.5 inches, and they have a wingspan that's about 11.25 inches. So they're actually a fairly large swallow bird. Purple martins are aerial insectivores, meaning that they catch insects from the air on the wing, and that's what they eat for their food source. They're a great natural insect control in and around homes, around farms. Historically, Amish communities have hosted purple martins as part of this sort of natural insect control, as well as Native Americans. Purple martins have been studied and shown to help control invasive insects such as fire ants. There have been a study with GPS trackers on birds, and they have been found feeding on billions of fire ant queens as high as 6,500 feet in the air. So that's pretty neat. And purple martins, some of their other typical food items include dragonflies, wasps, ants, moths, crickets, mayflies, some of those larger insects. So quite a diverse diet there, but again, aerial insectivore, meaning catching food on the fly or on the wing. Purple martins are a migratory songbird. They breed in North America, including here in Michigan. You can see on that map in the upper left there, we're kind of near the northern end of the breeding range. They winter in Brazil mostly and in the Amazon forest, which is important to consider because as a migratory songbird, they're not only dependent on healthy habitats here in Michigan and elsewhere in their breeding range, but also on their wintering grounds. So impacts of forest loss in the wintering grounds are really impactful to purple martins and other migratory songbirds. I have a couple photos here of the other subspecies. The lower right, that Subis subspecies, that's what we have here in the eastern part of their breeding range. The western subspecies are a little bit different. They are not colonial nesters, so they can nest individually. They'll use natural cavities, such as those created by woodpeckers and cacti, versus the purple martins in the east. They're primarily dependent on human-provided housing, whether that's those colonial-style multi-unit apartment houses or the gourds that are all hung in one area. They're a very social species. In one season, a purple martin pair will raise one nest or one clutch. Each clutch has 2 to 8 eggs in it, and the female incubates for 16 days usually. These eggs are pale and white, and the nest is it's usually in these nesting colonies. It's typical for a landlord to provide some nesting materials such as pine straw or cedar shavings, but the purple martins will line that with green leaves. Females have a brood patch, as do most songbirds, as do all the birds that are incubating their eggs. That helps transfer heat from the adult bird onto the eggs and keep them warm enough. Once the eggs hatch, and it may not all happen on the same day, if the eggs are laid on subsequent days, the chicks will fledge in approximately 28 days. So they've got quite a long time in the nest compared to some birds, for example, northern cardinals. Their chicks are in the nest for about 12 days, so it's quite a bit longer for these purple martins. During migration, they congregate in these roosts of thousands of birds after the nesting season as they prepare to fly south. Some of these huge roosts can actually be detected on weather radar, for example, when the birds are leaving the roost in the morning, which is a really neat way to study birds and bird movement. In Michigan, as recently as 2019, in the Lake St. Clair area in Walpole Island, there was a massive roost there found. The roost was known, but it was actually found in 2019. So that's really awesome. Unfortunately, purple martins, though they are still relatively abundant and we do see them in Michigan, they have been declining in population, both here in Michigan and nationwide. A lot of this has to do with loss of interest in providing those housing, habitat loss, which includes, of course, the nesting sites, and habitat degradation. A lot of that has to do with habitats that can provide their food source, which again are those insects on the wings. So we might think of lakes or wetlands that are healthy and functioning, and they can provide a lot of emergent insects for these birds to eat. Decline of insects has played a role in their population decline. Predation can be a big impact for purple martins, especially in these housing units. If there's not methods in place to prevent those predators. So for example, raccoons, snakes, even cats can climb the nest pole to access these nests of the purple martins and consume the eggs or the nestlings or even the adults. Hawks and owls can be predators too, but there are different ways to prevent this predation from happening at a colony site. Invasive species are actually a really big issue for purple martins. House sparrows and European starlings in particular, they're both cavity nesting species, and so they compete for these housing units. They're more aggressive and they're able to outcompete those purple martins. We'll talk a little bit later in the slideshow about how to exclude these species from purple martins housing. Overall, in the US, purple martins have been declining. And in Michigan specifically, this data is from the USGS Breeding Bird Survey that has been ongoing since the mid-1960s. In Michigan, there's been on average almost an 8% annual decline in purple martin population. That is huge. They are listed on the North American Bird Conservation Initiative as a watch list species. That doesn't mean that they're threatened or endangered, but it does mean that they are of conservation concern. In Michigan specifically, there have been 2 breeding bird atlases, one completed in the 1980s and the second completed in the early 2000s. Much of the second breeding bird atlas, much of the first breeding bird atlas data on Michigan purple martins was from a website that is now defunct. It was called michiganmartins.com, and there was a lot of information about purple martins and their locations throughout the state. So from the first atlas to the second atlas, there was a decrease statewide of 56%, and those are townships where purple martins were confirmed to be breeding. There are some limitations with these data. Purple martins are, the colonies are often found on private lands, which are undersurveyed in this type of data collection. But again, it's just an overall confirmation that purple martins are in decline, especially here in Michigan. So really what our Michigan Purple Martin Friends program is focused on is the recovery of populations of purple martins. It's really dependent on all of us, including all of you. So that might include putting up a well-managed purple martin house, might include planting a native plant garden, reducing pesticide use so that we're supporting our healthy populations of insects, mitigating climate change. There's many different ways to help the species at either a local level in your own community or at a regional level, which is what Michigan Audubon is trying to do. So by reducing these threats to purple martins, we're not only helping the martins, but we're also reducing threats to all aerial insectivores and to people. So some of the other aerial insectivores that we're concerned about include barn swallow, bank swallow, chimney swifts, some of those other birds that are just out there, they're eating insects, they're on the wing, and they're precipitously declining. So I did joke a little bit about it in the beginning about how we love it when everyone shares the purple martin stories about it, and I really mean that. We love hearing about your grandparents' purple martin house, and we want to work together with you to help future generations become excited about purple martins and continue to help in the overall conservation effort. This leads me to our Michigan Bird Friendly Communities program, of which this webinar today is part of the program. We kind of got up and running with a big grant in 2017 that really initiated our push towards urban bird conservation, encouraging native plants and native landscaping, improving our community education and outreach, and reducing urban hazards for birds. For purple martins, this really focuses on building community involvement. So in 2017, in the Lansing area, the greater Lansing area, and 2018 and 19, we installed several new purple martin colonies. We rehabbed a few different colonies with partners in the area. And since 2017, Michigan Audubon and volunteers, including Penny Briscoe, who was initially going to give this presentation, but unfortunately she was not able to today. She's been very crucial and vital in giving purple martin outreach presentations and workshops since 2017. So it's really about building community and getting people excited and involved. We also encourage landlords, purple martin landlords, to send their nesting data to Purple Martin Conservation Association because this helps at that community level, that community science research. Just a quick progress report on the greater Lansing area because it's fun to share about it. With the 10 new colonies or the rehabbed colonies in the greater Lansing area, we've had successful nesting beginning in 2018. 2019, we had 3 active colonies with 5 nests. And 2020, we did have volunteers continue to monitor carefully, and monitoring will continue moving forward as well. We do have a few vacancies for where we need volunteers to help us monitor purple martin colonies, including the empty ones in the greater Lansing area. So let us know if you want to get involved. Some of the partners that we've had in this area include the county park system, so Ingham County Parks, the City of Lansing, Waldemar Nature Center, and a local school. So there's lots of different partners, and that's really exciting. But it does come down to something that is difficult to overcome. Purple martin management is not easy. You see this photo here, there is a house sparrow in that photo. That is part of the problem. So if you build it, they will come. That's not necessarily the end of the story for purple martins. Some of the cheaper housing units range around $400 each. So that's a lot different than building a bluebird house and putting that up in your backyard. Once you get the housing up and it's in the right place, it takes years sometimes for the birds to find it, unless you're in an area already with purple martins. Purple martins require specific site conditions. They need an open area. They need to be near habitat that is producing their food. They do like to be near humans, but they need to be slightly away from a house or other structure. And they, there's also other factors, site fidelity. That's purple martins returning year after year to the same site. So if somebody takes down a martin colony, those martins might need to go find a new place. Or if you're a new landlord and you're putting up a purple martin house and there's no purple martins nearby, it will take a long time for them to find it. Invasive competitors like this house sparrow here are a big impact on purple martins. There's other aerial predators. I mentioned hawks and owls. There's climate change impacts with more intense and erratic weather events. Aerial insectivores like purple martins can go hungry quickly in those long spells of rain or kind of late season, late spring cold snaps. So there's been some reports of housing not being necessarily insulated enough in the Upper Peninsula, and early arriving birds may not survive. There's also dangers of pesticides, neonicotinoids, mosquito spraying, capitalizing on fears of spreading viruses like the mosquito-borne illnesses. And in general, all aerial insectivores are declining. It's very time intensive to monitor and to keep your purple martin house healthy and active. So how can you do it? It seems like a lot, doesn't it? It really comes down to that purple martins, it's a labor of love. People who are purple martin landlords, I think you can understand, and new landlords, you'll come to know this as well. This labor of love is what will save this species in Michigan. They're a delightfully engaging, social, beautiful bird. And we have kind of entered into this age in recent years of being a culture that's really into indoors or screen-based time. But especially with this past year, I think we've seen a lot of this. People are really looking to reconnect with nature. And luckily for us, observing birds and purple martins as a delightfully social bird, it can help us reconnect. Let's talk about landlord goals and some tips for being a good landlord. It's kind of a basic goal here, but we want to fledge healthy young purple martins. Average success rate might be about 50% from eggs laid to fledging healthy young birds. In good years, where there's no extreme weather events, where there's no food shortages, a good success rate can be 70 to 90%. So it's unlikely that you will have 100% success in fledging all of those young, in watching your purple martins fledge those young. Part of the big contributor to success is keeping out predators and invasive species. How can we attract purple martins and how can we monitor them? There's a few different ways to attract purple martins to a new site, especially. One can be playing the dawn song. I have this audio clip here. I'm not sure if it'll play, but we'll give it a whirl. And I don't think it's going to, but that's all right. If you get a chance, look up Purple Martin Dawn Song on the internet. It's a beautiful song that the male martins use both to defend a territory, but also to socialize and as part of being a colonial nesting species. As far as best practices for being a landlord, for monitoring the birds, where to put your colony site, any questions you might have, we really love the work and the information put out by Purple Martin Conservation Association. If you're a member there, you'll get an update magazine regularly, and there's a lot of different tools available on their website, whether you're not a member or not. Some of the nest checking tools that can be helpful, on the upper right hand corner, there's this circular wheel that helps you to know what date to check your nests so that you're not disturbing the birds, but that you can keep an eye on what the activity is. For ease of access to these nesting sites, whether it's gourds or houses, poles often have a pulley system, which makes it easy to raise what can quickly become a heavy setup if there's a lot of cavities or lots of gourds hanging there. Numbers on those gourds or the cavities can really help you to keep track of your data. Some accessories can include feeding trays for supplemental feeding, which I'll talk about in just a minute, perches for the purple martins to land on, owl guards, which can be these simple, they look sort of like wires coming down in front of the opening to the gourds, or those kind of horizontal bars on the house that can help prevent an owl from swooping down and reaching their foot into those nesting spaces. Purple Martin decoys, which is essentially, I don't have it outlined here, but it's the bird on the perch on the right-hand house, that horizontal perch on the top. Kind of looks like a martin, but if you look a little closer, it's just a plastic decoy. Those can actually be helpful for two ways. One, to attract purple martins to a new site because they're social. They want to go somewhere where maybe there's a dawn song playing and there's a purple martin decoy there. They can also be helpful in preventing predation of the purple martins. If a Cooper's hawk, for example, flies by, the martins are able to fly and get out of the way and get to safety, but those purple martin decoys, they're stationary, so that might distract that aerial predator. Supplemental feeding is something that landlords can do. It's just like putting out a bird feeder for other birds, but a little bit different food that you put out there. Crickets and mealworms are a great source of food. Supplemental feeding is something that is helpful, especially after extreme weather events, such as 2 or more days of cold or rainy weather. It can really help those birds thrive. Some landlords will even go so far as to use a slingshot and put those crickets or mealworms into the air so the purple martins can actually go and catch them. Martins will feed out of platform feeders, and other landlords have had success feeding scrambled eggs, especially if it's very extreme weather. This is not like a regular occurrence. This is as needed. Where do you want to put your purple martin colonies? Some people will put them out on docks with the bottom of the pole driven into the lake bottom. That might be a little bit harder to install. It's not required. Others have them on land where the poles are set into the ground and secured with concrete. In general, best placement practices are away from trees, in an open area, near water or wetland, a marsh, near an open field maybe. And the most important thing is that you're able to access it to make sure that you can help with the invasive species control and monitoring the purple martins throughout the season. Some ways of preventing predators from getting into the purple martin nest boxes are called predator guards. This can be a simple stovepipe guard. There are lots of kind of DIY projects to create this on your own, or you can be creative. Others have used PVC pipe on the bottom of the pole. This is to prevent something like a raccoon or a snake from being able to grip the pole and scramble upwards. Some landlords will use netting guards on the bottom of the house or the bottom of the pole to prevent snakes from crawling up, but we recommend against using netting because it can be lethal for snakes, and native snakes are important too. They're a part of the ecosystem, so we don't want to harm the snakes. As far as monitoring your nests, we do recommend continuing with weekly nest checks, keeping written records, using those age guide helpers, that wheel again in the upper right corner, that's called the Purple Martin Prognosticator. We do encourage Purple Martin landlords to participate in Project Martin Watch, which is through the Purple Martin Conservation Association and Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it's a great way to get involved as a community scientist. Some landlords do nest replacements partway through the nesting season. This is a great way to help control nest parasites, and it is something that we recommend. And this, all it involves is moving quickly because we don't want to disturb the birds for too long, replacing the nest material in a nest once during the nesting period. The nesting material, when you replace it, can be cedar shavings, white pine needles, or just long dried pine needles. And it's important to not use insecticides because some people may want to do that to prevent parasites in the nest, but it's actually harmful to the birds, and we do not want you to do that. A study by the Purple Martin Conservation Association found that with Purple Martin nests that had nest parasites like mites, only 44% of the nestlings survived to fledge successfully, but with nest replacement, where parasites are reduced, 84% of those nestlings fledged successfully. So it can be really helpful to do this. With non-native competitors, I keep mentioning house sparrows and Eurasian or European starlings. And why is it important that we control these competitors? They not only will compete for those nest site cavities and they're more aggressive than Purple Martins, but they actually will destroy eggs by pecking holes in them. They can kill nestlings, and they sometimes kill adult martins as well. So they are a really big issue for our Purple Martins. There are starling resistant entrances for Purple Martin houses. So if you have an older style house that has just a circular hole entrance, that is a wide open invitation for European starlings and for house sparrows. These starling resistant entrances are different shapes. Sometimes they're a half circle crescent. Sometimes they have a little bit of a wavy pattern on the bottom. They allow the Purple Martins to go in and out just fine because they have a smaller body size than the starlings. Unfortunately, these don't exclude house sparrows, which are similar in size to the Purple Martins. So when you're managing for these invasive species like house sparrow, because house sparrows are non-native to North America and they are invasive, they are not protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and so we can remove their nests from a martin house. But it's important to know what their nest looks like because we need to know what kind of species it is before we remove the nest. If you're a Purple Martin landlord, you might not want to have tree swallows nesting in your Purple Martin housing, but they are a native species and they are protected. So if that happens, you do need to leave it. But you can provide tree swallow housing next to or near your Purple Martin housing to discourage them. So just to compare some of these similar looking house nests, the top left photo gives an example of what house sparrow nests look like. They're often kind of trashy looking. They're filled with all sorts of different things, including mud, leaves, grasses, bits of actual plastic trash. In the upper right, tree swallows, the key factor with them is that they line their nests with a lot of feathers, so they're pretty well identified. On the bottom left, we have that Purple Martin nest again, which is just kind of the pine straw with green leaves. Not much of a nest there. And barn swallows, they don't actually nest in cavities. They nest on structures like under the eaves of a roof or under a boat launch kind of structure. And they build their nests with a lot of mud and grasses. So to kind of summarize here, Purple Martins are really dependent on conservation efforts by people. they're entirely reliant, the eastern subpopulation of purple martins are entirely reliant on human provided housing. So whether that's the gourds or the apartment style housing. It's unlike typical habitat management or bird conservation for other species. So a good comparison is the Kirtland's warbler, where in Michigan, we manage jack pine forest habitat for Kirtland's warbler because they need a very specific type and age class and structure of those jack pine forests to nest in. Whereas with purple martins, they'll use a range of actual habitat types, but we need to provide the housing for them. So the focus is really cultural. And I think I mentioned before, it's very similar to the conservation efforts for eastern bluebirds, which were declining in population, but there was such a big turnaround in humans providing housing for those bluebirds that bluebird populations are actually doing really well now. But unfortunately, with purple martins, there is a higher price tag. So for future of purple martins, it's really in the hands of you and everybody else who loves those martins. It would be great if everyone becomes involved with nest monitoring, growing the enthusiasm of the next generation of purple martin enthusiasts, sharing your knowledge and your best practices with friends, families, neighbors, etc. So how can you get involved with purple martins? There's a lot of community involvement around the country. During an in-person presentation, I love to ask the room, who has a martin colony? You know, who wants to improve on their landlording efforts? But I can't do that in this situation necessarily. But I just want to show a couple of examples. In the middle left, with sort of the multi-layered housing there, that was a colony that was established in 2012 at Kellogg Bird Sanctuary in Southwest Michigan. And other locations just shows the involvement of community, neighbors, children. I threw in a photo of myself there in the lower left because I get really excited about purple martins as well. An example here, this is the Briscoe Colony in Vicksburg. They established this back in 1985 and their colony is just thriving. I did highlight these two other houses in the photo with these red circles. Those are bluebird and tree swallow nest boxes. They can be placed very close to the purple martin colony. This helps those bluebird and tree swallows have a place to nest and choose to not nest in the actual purple martin gourds there. So they can coexist, but we need to provide enough housing for everybody. One thing that Michigan Audubon has done is we've created an online purple martin colony registration where we ask landlords or people, if you know a neighbor, for example, to write in your information to contribute to this online map of purple martin colonies in Michigan. The point of this is that we want to help keep track of the success of purple martin colonies across Michigan, to kind of have an eye or an ear on the ground about how purple martin populations are doing in Michigan, because tracking purple martin populations is not as easy or accurate as can be done for other songbird species, for example, through the breeding bird survey routes. So if you have a chance, go to our website there. I'll list this again at the end of the presentation, but it's all under michiganaudubon.org/PUMA, which stands for Purple Martin. There's also a Michigan Purple Martins Friends Facebook page or Facebook group. It's a great way to build community. This is a very active site, so whether you're a longtime purple martin landlord or somebody just getting started out, it's a very friendly group. People help answer each other's questions, and it's a fun place to share your excitement too, especially as we come towards spring and purple martins returning. So with that, I'll leave you with a couple of resources, and we'll have time for questions as well. And I just appreciate your attention and your presence here today with this webinar about purple martins. Lindsay, do you want to see if there's any questions out there?
Yeah, thanks, Linnea. Sorry, I was just finishing sending some links in the chat, and I'll get to the Facebook in just a second. But so there are a few different questions here, but if you have others, feel free to add them either into the Q&A box on Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. But we did get a question near the beginning of the presentation, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but they're wondering if you can discuss the differences between a barn swallow and a purple martin.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a few differences in just how they look. It is difficult to tell when you're just observing with the naked eye and you have swallows and martins swooping around over your lake or your lake shore. The martins in general, they look like a very dark black bird, especially the adult males. The barn swallows, they have more of a pronounced fork in their tail, so that the longer edges of the outer tail make sort of a forked shape. Overall, their coloration is a bit different. For a great side-by-side comparison, I really highly recommend going to a website called allaboutbirds.org. That's the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website, and you can do side-by-side comparisons to look at how they differ in their plumage or what their feathers look like.
Great. I also have a question here about house wrens and if they're a problem in terms of nest competition.
Yeah, that's a great question. House wrens can and will nest in purple martin colonies. House wrens are another native species, so they are a protected species. We don't want to harm their nests. House wrens will nest in other boxes as well, including smaller spaces. So on some of the Michigan Audubon sanctuary properties, we have nests that we put out for bluebirds, for chickadees, for house wrens, tree swallows, and the wrens sometimes will choose the one with the smallest internal space. House wrens tend to build dummy nests as well. The males will actually stuff sticks into many different cavities, and the female house wren will go and choose, what we observe to be the best one, and build her nest there. So if the house wren has an active nest with eggs, don't touch it, don't remove it. They are protected, but if it is just a dummy nest, it can be removed.
Great. So we actually have Sarah from Kellogg Bird Sanctuary with us today, and she said that they replaced the old house in 2014 with gourds, but they're often asked where the purple martins used to nest before humans started building housing for them. So I would love you to talk about that because I think this is a really exciting thing to share.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't unfortunately have a good answer for it. To my general knowledge, the history and the culture of having purple martins in colonies goes back to days when Native Americans were hanging gourds and purple martins were nesting there. So it could be that this eastern subspecies, and this is kind of speculation on my part here, but it could be that this subspecies adjusted over time, whether that's hundreds or thousands of years, to nest with these human colonies and nest in these concentrated areas. So unlike the western subspecies, those purple martins still nest in natural cavities. They're not colonial nesters, so that could have been how the eastern subspecies used to nest.
Okay, so when should I be de-winterizing my purple martin house? Or in the case of someone who hasn't yet erected a purple martin house, when's the best time to open it for the spring or put it up?
That's a really great question. So if you have had an active colony with purple martins returning from last year, it's a great time to put up your housing, open the housing at the end of March or at the latest at the beginning of April, because those adult males, they'll come back on migration and arrive before the females do. So they want to claim a spot for themselves. If you're concerned about house sparrows, which are around here year-round, you can block off the entrances, but then once you see a purple martin arrive back, you can open up those entrances right away. If you're putting up a new colony, I think the recommendation is kind of like mid to end of April to have it up and open, so that the new, or like the younger birds that are in their first season for breeding, they might be going out to new sites and checking out new different places. So or if a colony was taken down somewhere else, those martins will be seeking out a new place.
Great. How about the preferred number of gourds? Someone asked for the preferred number of gourds, or is any better than none? And I think there's probably a sweet spot in the middle, right? One isn't enough, but You don't want too many?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think there's two questions in there. One is, are we asking about housing versus gourds? Or are we asking just in general, how many cavities should there be for a purple martin colony? I don't have a great answer for like what the minimum number should be, but I think in general, 4 to 6 should be minimum. And then if there's more martins and they fill up those cavities as your colony expands, you can add on or add a different pole. And from my personal experience with working with the Michigan Audubon Purple Martin colonies, where we've had nest success in our recently installed colonies, we started out with 1 nest in the first year. In the second year, I think we had 3 or 5 nests, and the purple martins were checking it out. So in that first year, once we just had 1 pair nesting there, we still left some of those other entrances blocked off to help prevent the house sparrows from going in. As far as the different styles of housing versus gourds, I think that's kind of up to landlord preference. I don't know that there's actually been research done on purple martin preference. With the Michigan Audubon managed colonies, we've had purple martins use both. And a great solution might be put up a house and hang up 2 gourds underneath it. So it's kind of a combination and the martins get to choose.
I think that's great advice. Based on my experience when working with Michigan Audubon, I know that there's a lot of trial and error, right? I mean, we've tried a lot of things and it hasn't been as successful as we hoped, and we've tried different things. And I've heard that time and time again from a lot of landlords. This, like you mentioned in your presentation, this is a labor of love. It takes a lot of time and energy, but the results are great, right? It's worth it in the end. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of property, landscape, area might be suitable for a purple martin colony?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in general, it needs to be an open space that's at least 50 or 100 feet wide. I think the larger the better, because purple martins, being aerial insectivores, they swoop and they fly, catching insects. They need space to escape from predators, which is why the location of the nest site should be at least 50 feet away from any trees, preferably farther. They do like to be near human activity though. So whether that's near a park with people going to it or in your backyard, I think the biggest thing is just open space. As far as habitat, it's really important that there's native plants or native landscaping or just generally habitat out there, because that's going to produce the food, the insects that the martins need. So having mowed lawn in your yard, for example, that's well, and that's really great for recreational activities. But if you can do a combination where there's also an area of native landscaping, that's really helpful for the birds.
Perfect. So I have one more question at the moment. So if you guys have other questions, we've got a couple minutes. You can throw them at us. But the last question I have here is, if purple martins, barn swallows, tree swallows, and bluebirds are all present in establishing successful nests, will it help prevent house sparrows and European starlings predation amongst the desired native birds?
That's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that. I think generally speaking, house sparrows and starlings are very persistent. They're both aggressive species. I don't know that having multiple of those cavity nesting native species is going to keep them out, but it certainly could potentially be a deterrent.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to look at things, and it would be a really interesting study to kind of find out more. And I think one of the best ways for us to find out, even anecdotally, is for us to keep doing things like putting up these purple martin houses and nest boxes and planting native plants and just really encouraging those native species and giving them a more fair shot at survival.
And hearing from you, especially for something like the Michigan Purple Martin Friends Facebook group, just that community dialogue between everyone who's involved, we can really learn from each other.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much sums it up for us for today. We're really happy to have had you all join us for the last 45 minutes, and I hope that you're all encouraged to either become a Purple Martin landlord, continue to be a Purple Martin landlord, or maybe volunteer to help monitor some Purple Martin colonies in your area. If you have further questions and you want to get in touch with us, you can send us an email at the Michigan Audubon General email address, which is birds@michiganaudubon.org. There are also a lot of really great resources available through our website, michiganaudubon.org, the Purple Martin Conservation Association, in the Facebook group. So there's lots of resources out there for you. If you still have burning questions, there are lots of people who have a lot of experience who are willing to share. This is a really great community to be a part of, specifically Purple Martin landlords. Not that all birding communities aren't great, but they've got a lot of really great experiences under their belt that they are happy to share with other people, because this labor of love is just that, very much a labor of love. I think that's a great way to explain it, Linnea. So thank you again to Linnea. Thank you to everyone else. And I hope you're able to join us for next month's Lunch and Learn, where the topic is going to be bird window collisions. So you can find out more about that on the Michigan Audubon website or through our Facebook. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us.